What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to the channel, where today I'm going to be going over some common causes as to why your PC might be losing performance, or in other words,
slowing down.
And while there are certainly other causes than what I'm going to go over here today, these are just the most common ones from my personal experience. So if there's any important ones to you that I left out, feel free to write them down in the comments, because again, this is just in my experience and is not meant to be a universal truth. But without further ado, and in no particular order, number 1, your CMOS battery has died. And when this happens, while the version of your BIOS is not lost, all your actual BIOS settings will revert back to factory defaults and will not save after shutdown until you replace the battery. Now, there are technically several instances where you wouldn't even notice. If you had something like a somewhat older OEM pre-built with a BIOS you can't change anything meaningful in, or really any PC with a restricted BIOS in general, then this most likely wouldn't have much impact on you, because as long as your hard drive isn't failing and you have something plugged into your motherboard's CPU fan header, your PC will most likely still boot into Windows just fine, albeit a little bit slower. But if you have at least an AM4 level system or a more modern pre-built, then depending on things like the advertised speed of your RAM, the impact could be significant. And while a CMOS battery lasts 10 years on average, they don't always. So how do we check for this? Well, the easiest way, in my opinion, would be to simply open up Task Manager and just check the speed your RAM is currently running at. And while there are certainly other BIOS settings that will affect performance, again, this is just my opinion of the easiest way to check for a dead CMOS. Simply right-click on the taskbar, hit Task Manager, then go to the Performance tab, and click Memory. Your speed will be listed here. As you can see, in my case, I have DDR5 memory running at its advertised speeds of 6,000 megatransfers. But if I didn't have Expo enabled in my BIOS, my memory would be running at only the base speed of DDR5, which is only 4,800 megatransfers. And if your CMOS battery dies, then it will be disabled the moment you shut your system down, just like any other BIOS settings that aren't factory default. And because to the manufacturers this is technically memory overclocking, even though it's the speeds we bought, Expo is not going to be a factory default enabled setting. Now, DDR5 memory has only been around since 2021, so if you have DDR5 memory, then a dead CMOS is highly unlikely to be your problem. And if you have an Intel system and not AMD like me, then this feature would actually be called XMP in your BIOS. So in terms of DDR4 memory, without XMP or Expo, your memory would be running at either 2133 megatransfers or 2400 megatransfers, instead of say 3200 or 3600 megatransfers or whatever your advertised speed was. Now, if you didn't build your own system, or you did, and this is simply something you weren't aware of, then before you declare your CMOS battery dead, go ahead and try enabling XMP or Expo in the BIOS, then shutting down completely and turning your system back on after about 10 to 15 seconds and checking the speeds again. Start by accessing your BIOS by mashing the delete key upon booting your system. Almost any modern board will have a very quick and easy way to enable XMP or Expo right on the initial screen, just like you see here. And in terms of an MSI board, it'll more than likely look something like this, where it either turns red or becomes no longer shaded out to let you know it's enabled. Now again, I already had it enabled, so it's not going to show any changes here, but once you've made sure that yours is enabled, go ahead and hit save and exit, and you should see the changes listed right here. Go ahead and click OK to reset and reboot your system back into Windows. And now that we've enabled it, we need to power down the system to make sure it's saved. Wait about 30 seconds and then boot your system again, and either go back into BIOS and check the setting, or come back into Windows and check Task Manager again. And if the setting's saved, you should see your advertised speed, and if not, your CMOS battery is in fact dead. But the good news is, a CMOS battery really is nothing more than a simple 2032 coin cell battery you can buy for a couple dollars at any grocery store. And as far as how to replace one, it's as simple as this. And once you've replaced it, go ahead and enable Expo and all your other BIOS settings if you had any others changed again, and you'll be right as rain. Number 2, you have too many apps running at the same time. And from my own personal experiences in diagnosing people's performance issues, I'm willing to bet most, if not all of them, are set to open automatically whenever you turn your PC on. And if you're someone who's ever wondered, why does my PC keep getting louder? Well, then this is probably one reason why. You see, companies want you to use the apps that you install. So by default, most of them will be set to auto run when you boot your PC just by installing them. Now, if you're playing in 4K, then this probably isn't going to affect you very much, because if you're gaming in 4K, you probably already have a high-end enough CPU and plenty of RAM to make this a non-issue anyways. But if you have an older CPU or even a current Ryzen 5 or i5 and you're playing in 1080p, then the performance loss can be pretty substantial. And yes, obviously RAM will play a factor here too, but we'll talk about that later. So how can we check for this and how can we solve it? Well, the first thing to do would be to open up Task Manager again, only this time we're going to go to the startup menu. And if you're on Windows 10, then the menu would actually be up here and it would actually say Startup Apps, rather than having this little speedometer looking icon that Windows 11 has. Now notice how everything here says disabled. Well, that's because I've came here and disabled all of them. But if I didn't, apps like Steam here would absolutely be running every single time I booted my PC, whether I wanted it to or not. And although an app like Steam simply being open in the background wouldn't cause too much harm alone, imagine if all my game launchers were adding up in the background. You might think that just because you close the Steam window that pops up when it starts that you've closed the application entirely, but you haven't. You've nearly minimized it to the background and it's still pulling resources. So to fully disable these apps from running whenever you boot your PC, simply right click on them, and instead of saying enable, it'll say disable. So go ahead and click that and it'll be disabled. And for the majority of apps, that's all you gotta do. But further beware, not all your apps are going to show up in this start menu and will still be set to auto run when you install them. Now I myself don't have any good examples of this installed, but they do exist. And so to check and see if you have any other apps running, simply come down here to the hidden icons. And because I'm currently using another PC and a capture card to make this video, and the fact that I've already disabled every startup app that I don't want, you'll notice that the only actual visible app that I have running right now is the L-Connect software for all my fans and streamer LEDs. And I say visible because there are still apps like Armory Crate that will not even appear here or the startup menu. And when it comes to RGB software like L-Connect, the truth is you can right click and quit application all you want, but if we look through our task manager and go down to L, we'll notice the L-Connect service is still running in the background. And this is why I've actually seen people go as far as to set their lights and completely uninstall the software they used entirely, hoping that if they never power cycle their system, the lights will never reset. And that actually can work, but it won't always. But if you notice that you have any software running that you didn't know of or didn't want, make sure you check the in-app settings, as there usually is a way to disable the auto run. So limit all of your apps if you haven't already, and depending on how powerful of a system you have, I can almost guarantee it will at least idle quieter, and in some cases like the last system I checked out for a friend, you're about to get 40% of your CPU back. Yeah, it happens, guys. Number 3. Your CPU is overheating due to dried up thermal paste. And while this certainly could also be caused by leaving the sticker on the cooler when you're installing it, or just an improper mount entirely, those are the kinds of things you're going to notice immediately, not necessarily something that changes over time. Now while they are obviously competitors of ours, I'm not going to lie here and say that OEMs like Dell, Alienware, and HP Omen haven't massively improved over the years, but it wasn't all that long ago that they were still absolute garbage computers with terrible thermal designs like the old Aurora cases that Dell was still using in 2020. And if you're someone who only buys pre-builts, then you may not even be aware that thermal paste is even a thing. So if your system was already running loud since early on, and you're not running any kind of monitoring software or checking your temperatures, your system could be throttling in an attempt to keep it from killing itself. So how can we check for this? Now while you could certainly go remove your cooler and check under the hood, there are certainly a multitude of much simpler ways. In my opinion, it would be this app right here, Hardware Info 64, and if you watch any big tech YouTuber, then you've more than likely already heard this before. But Hardware Info 64 is a wonderful free app that can certainly deliver far more system information than just temperatures, but for the purposes of this video, we'll stick to that. Simply download the app from their website right here, find it in your downloads, and then install it like any other app. Each time you open the app, you'll have the option to choose whether you want the full version or just the sensors or summary. And since all we need is the temperatures here, we can just do sensors only. Now when you open the app yourself, it will look slightly different than this, as I have customized the view within my app with a double window so that I can see more at once. But simply scroll down until you see CPU. I don't remember the exact default order, but eventually you'll see some temperatures listed under your CPU like so. Now without overcomplicating things and explaining what each of these little CPU sensors actually are, all you really need to know here is that red equals bad. or in other words, throttling, or in other words, slowing down to save itself from melting. Now, the most common critical temperature for a CPU to begin to throttle is 95 degrees. But 95 degrees is not universal, and it can sometimes be lower or even higher. And throttling can manifest itself in different ways, but most notably for gaming would be constant dips to your FPS. So if your temperature is over 90 degrees and turning red, you're probably throttling. And even running above 80 degrees is still not what I would call great for the longevity of your system. And that could even be a sign that you need to go ahead and change the pace now. But back to the topic of throttling, if that's the case for you, you absolutely need to lift the hood and check out what's going on under there, and most likely, you're gonna find some crusty up dried paste like this. And lastly, number 4, it's simply time to upgrade. And now this is more of a sad reality that anybody will have to face with any system at some point than it is something to troubleshoot, and more so geared towards the office PC users. But as someone who has to suffer this reality every day on a crappy company assigned Optiplex at my day job, I feel it's very relevant to the times and topic. And while certainly all components of a PC will need to be upgraded at some point, I'm going to focus specifically on memory because that's the exact component causing my daily agony on a work-assigned desktop I can't take home and secretly upgrade. Now, while 8GB of RAM may still be enough for basics like web browsing and watching YouTube videos, even many home office users are finding that 8GB is just no longer enough. Because it's important to remember that it's proven over and over again that the performance of your parts does not degrade, but rather the apps you use, like Microsoft Teams for example, continually receive updates throughout the years that add more and more data for your parts to process just to run the same app. Think of every time an app gets a new feature. Well, this new feature is just more data to your PC. It's also important to keep in mind that your RAM doesn't have to be full to start slowing down. Now, there are multiple reasons as to why that happens without being technically full, but in the interest of not making this video overly complicated, I'll leave it at that. But the bottom line being, for an office PC, 16GB is the new standard. And in terms of a gaming PC, you're more likely to flat out know you're RAM limited when the first time you open up a game only to be met with a very choppy and stuttery picture, or just by looking at the recommended specs that the game lists. But 8GB has not been enough even for 1080p for quite some time now. These days when it comes to gaming, it's looking like 16GB won't even be enough here pretty soon, which is exactly why hardly any 2-stick 16GB kits of DDR5 even exist, and why we no longer even list any pre-builts with less than 32GB on our own site. So if you're looking to upgrade to a new PC, whether for basic use or a gaming PC, make sure you go to beeasybuilds.com and see what builds we currently have available, or contact us at any time for a free quote on a custom PC at an incredibly low rate. And with that, that's all for this one. Hopefully it helped you or you learned something, and make sure you subscribe for more useful tutorials, build videos, and more. And until next time, game on and be easy.